welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at gods5minutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. October 2, 1996, Aeroperu, a Boeing 727-23A, departed Santiago, Chile for a night flight to Lima, Peru, 70 souls on board. Takeoff was 42 minutes after midnight. Everything outside the airplane's windows was darkness, sea and sky. This is no obstacle to the truth. Both the pilot and co-pilot were highly experienced. Captain Eric Guevara had almost 22,000 flight hours, and his first officer, David Reverado, had almost 8,000. But circumstances developed causing even this amount to not be enough. The pilots discovered shortly after takeoff that even their most basic flight instruments were behaving erratically. The flight management computer, which calculates the best flight path, figuring in airspace restrictions and weather, and interfaces with the plane's autopilot to automatically control its altitude, its direction, flying speed. The computer continually updates this information as fuel is burned, which alters the plane's weight, and as wind and other variables impact the travel, wasn't working. On Flight 603, the flight management computer started sending the pilots emergency messages, and worse, they contradicted each other. There was a message that the plane was flying too fast, and that triggered a voice warning. The plane's control column started shaking, and caution lights began to flash. Then there was a warning the plane's airspeed was too low, and it would fall from the sky. With this warning came on another kind of alarm, and there were amber or red lights appearing on cockpit instruments. There came a warning that the airplane was flying too low. This set off still another alarm, and a voice began to repeat over and over, "Terrain, terrain, pull up. Terrain, terrain, pull up." Still other instruments showed the rudder ratio was malfunctioning. Who could blame the crew for what they did next? They declared an emergency and asked for instructions to return to the Lima airport. But that wouldn't be easy. The pilots quickly decided they couldn't trust the plane's instruments to tell them where they were in the sky, and so they asked ground control to use its radar to give them the information they so badly needed: altitude, airspeed, distance from the airport, the angle of flight they needed to safely arrive. What neither the pilots nor the air traffic controllers realized is that the ground crew were receiving this vital information from the aircraft's own transponders, and they were just as faulty as the readings the pilots were looking at and hearing in the cockpit. So the pilots couldn't tell how high they were, how fast the airplane was going, or even very well if it was going up or down. It went up. It went up too high, too fast, and it began to fall. It fell into a stall, and the wings lost their lift. This happened not once but several times, and each time the craft lost airspeed and came closer to the waves below, although the altimeter still showed thousands of feet of height. Meanwhile, the ground proximity warning was continuously sounding its grim message, "Terrain, terrain, pull up." At last, with such a bewildering and conflicting array of danger signals, all warnings these experienced pilots had been taught to react to instantly, the distress became too much, and the pilots began to quarrel with each other about what they should be doing. That was near the end. There were no survivors. You see, all the instruments affected received their data from static ports on the underside of the fuselage. A cleaning crew had recently polished the plane, and someone had put tape over the ports. Simple as that. But it is an example of what Satan tries to do to us. Maybe our static ports are our daily prayers. Finding your morning supply of grace for the day is how we maintain our orientation in the world about us. If the Lord will not guide us, we are certain to lose our ability to cope with life the way we were meant to do, and we, unshepherded, are sure to receive conflicting and confusing information we are not equipped to handle. We need a captain on board who sends us always constant and wise signals, and he's waiting to hear from you. Have you talked to him today?
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at godsfiveminutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.